Imagine scheduling a duel between two gods and realizing one of them simply doesn't show up. That is the situation Israel is in. At this point, the nation has a serious identity problem, not a dramatic one, not a loud rebellion, just a quiet, awkward confusion. Officially, Israel follows Yahweh. Practically, many people also rely on Baal, rain god, fertility god, very popular, very convenient. So the people do what people usually do when they don't want to choose. They try to keep both sides happy. A sacrifice to Yahweh, a ritual for Baal, 1 foot here, 1 foot there, spiritually multitasking. If Yahweh is real, great. If Baal brings rain, even better. No commitment required. And that's exactly the problem. Then Elijah shows up. No army, no followers, no political backing. Just one man standing in front of an entire nation that would really prefer not to have this conversation. Elijah doesn't arrive shouting. He doesn't threaten anyone. He simply asks a question that instantly drains the room of energy. How long are you going to limp between two opinions? No one answers. Not because they disagree, but because the question exposes them. Choosing means risk. Choosing means being wrong in public, and being wrong in public is expensive. So Elijah offers a solution, a public test. No speeches, no debates, no long explanations, just a clear demonstration. Whichever God responds, that's the real one. And yes, this gets out of control very fast, because Elijah isn't suggesting a symbolic challenge. He's proposing a live test. No edits, no second chances, no excuses afterward, 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, no human fire. The God who answers with fire wins. That's it. It's the kind of plan no strategist would approve. Elijah is alone. Baal has numbers. Baal has volume. Baal has confidence. Elijah has none of that. Statistically speaking, Elijah shouldn't even try. Naturally, the crowd leans toward Baal. More prophets, more noise, more visible support, that usually works. So Elijah gathers everyone on Mount Carmel and makes it painfully simple. If Baal is God, follow him. If Yahweh is God, follow him. Pick one. Again, nothing. No applause, no boos, no reaction, just silence. A long, uncomfortable silence where everyone suddenly becomes very interested in the ground. It's not defiance, it's hesitation, a collective pause. An emotional draw where no one wants to make the first move. Elijah lets the silence stretch, because silence, when it goes on long enough, stops being neutral. Then Elijah steps aside and lets Baal's prophets go first. Polite, confident, almost suspiciously calm. They get the altar, they get the sacrifice, they get all day. Elijah gets nothing but time, and then he adds the final rule, the one that makes the entire situation dangerous: no fire from human hands. The God who responds, it responds on his own. At that moment, this stops being religious theater. It becomes a public exposure. And once the test begins, silence is no longer an option. Because if Baal is real, he has to show up. And if he doesn't, well, that's going to be very noticeable. The plan is simple and completely absurd. That's Elijah's pitch. No fine print, no backup plan, no safety net. Just a challenge so straightforward, it almost feels irresponsible. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices. No human fire. Whichever God answers with fire wins. That's the entire rule book. No judges, no panels, no interpretation afterward. Either something happens or it doesn't. And to make it worse, this isn't happening in private. This is live. It's like a public stress test with no editing, no replays, and no second chances. Once it starts, whatever happens is permanent. You can't reframe it later. You can't say it was symbolic. You can't explain it away. Fire falls or it doesn't. Elijah sets the rules and immediately puts himself at a disadvantage. On one side, Elijah, one person. No crowd, no chanting, no visible support. On the other side, the prophets of Baal. Many of them. Loud, confident, experienced, fully convinced this is going to end well for them. They look like the safe bet. And the crowd notices. People start leaning, not officially, just emotionally. More voices usually means more power. More confidence usually means better odds. That's how most public contests work. Statistically speaking, Elijah shouldn't even try. If this were a poll, Baal would be winning. If it were a popularity contest, Baal takes it easily. If it were about volume, energy, or enthusiasm, Baal is already ahead before the challenge even begins, which makes Elijah's calm attitude confusing. He doesn't rush. He doesn't hype himself up. He doesn't try to balance the odds. He just hands the first move to Baal's prophets. Very generous. They start early. They prepare their altar, arrange the sacrifice, get everything just right, and then they begin calling on Baal. At first it looks normal, then louder, then more intense. They shout, they chant, they move faster, they dance around the altar, repeating the same appeals again and again. Nothing happens. So they increase the effort. More noise, more movement, more urgency. They jump, they cry out, they beg. They repeat the ritual, like volume alone might change the outcome. Still nothing. The sun keeps moving. The crowd keeps watching. And Elijah stays quiet. The longer it goes on, the stranger it feels. This was supposed to be easy. Baal is the popular god, the reliable one, the one with answers. But the altar stays cold. No spark, no flame, no reaction. The prophets keep going anyway, because stopping would mean admitting something is wrong. And that's when the atmosphere starts to shift. What began as confidence slowly turns into effort. What began as effort turns into strain. And what began as noise starts to feel like compensation. Everyone is watching. No one is interrupting. No one is explaining. There's no official timeout. Just time passing, minute by minute, with nothing to show for it. And that's when the silence hiding behind all that noise starts to become noticeable. And this is where the silence starts to get uncomfortable. Time passes and passes and passes, and nothing changes. No fire, no response. No sign of anything supernatural, dramatic, or even mildly interesting. The altar stays exactly the same as it was when the day started. Cold, silent, unimpressed. The prophets of Baal keep going anyway. At first, the lack of response is easy to ignore. Maybe Baal is waiting. Maybe timing matters. Maybe this is all part of the process. So they keep calling out. Louder now. More movement. More repetition. Same words again and again, as if volume might unlock something that wasn't working before. Still nothing. That's when Elijah finally speaks. Not with anger, not with a sermon, just with commentary. The kind you'd make when something is going very wrong and pretending otherwise is getting awkward. Maybe Baal is busy, he suggests. A pause. Or maybe he stepped away. Another pause. Or maybe he's asleep. And then the final possibility, delivered almost casually. Or maybe he's just not there. It lands harder than shouting ever could. Because Elijah isn't arguing theology. He's pointing out the obvious. The altar is still empty. The sky is still quiet. The God who was supposed to be reliable isn't responding. It's like calling customer support, listening to hold music for hours, and slowly realizing no one is coming back on the line. The prophets do not appreciate the commentary. They respond by escalating. More noise, louder cries, faster movement. The ritual intensifies. What started as confident ceremony turns into frantic effort. They jump around the altar. They shout themselves hoarse. They push harder, as if commitment alone could force a response. Time keeps moving. The sun climbs higher. The crowd shifts. Not dramatically, just enough to notice something feels off. Because effort is increasing, but results are not. And that's never a good sign. The prophets double down. They repeat the process. Again and again. Same words. Same motions. Same silence. At some point, the spectacle becomes uncomfortable to watch, not because it's violent, but because it's ineffective. Every added action highlights the same problem. Nothing is happening. The more they try, the worse it looks. What started as confidence now feels like panic. What started as volume now feels like desperation. And the altar never responds. No spark, no flame, no reaction of any kind. Just a lot of people working very hard to get the same result. Zero. The crowd can feel it now, even without saying it out loud. Silence has crept in between the chants. Not total silence, but the kind that slips through noise when noise stops working. The prophets slow down, then speed up again, unsure what else to do. Because stopping would mean admitting failure, and continuing isn't helping. That's when Elijah steps forward again. Not rushed, not excited, just ready. Because the test was never about effort, it was about response. And one side has been trying all day, with absolutely nothing to show for it. And then it's Elijah's turn. Elijah doesn't start by shouting, he starts by rebuilding. That alone already feels different. While everyone else has spent the entire day making noise, Elijah focuses on something simple. He repairs the altar, stone by stone. Calm, methodical, no rush, no performance. The altar isn't new, it's restored. Then he prepares the sacrifice. Carefully, precisely, nothing dramatic. Just doing the work in full view of everyone watching. And then Elijah does something that makes no practical sense at all. He asks for water, not a little water, a lot of it. They pour it over the offering, then again, until the sacrifice is soaked. The wood is soaked. The trench around the altar fills up. Everything that is supposed to burn is now drenched. It's like trying to start a campfire after dumping buckets of water on it, multiple times, on purpose. From a human perspective, Elijah has just made the challenge harder for himself for no reason, which is exactly the point. There's no trick here, no hidden spark, no way to explain what happens next as coincidence. Once everything is ready, Elijah finally speaks. No chanting, no repetition, no dramatic build-up, just a short prayer, one sentence, direct, almost understated. He doesn't ask for spectacle, he doesn't hype the moment, he doesn't repeat himself until something happens. He simply speaks, and then it happens. Immediately, fire falls, not a small flame, not a flicker. Fire consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones. Even the water in the trench disappears. There's no delay, no build-up, no confusion about whether it worked. It works, completely. The crowd goes silent, not the awkward silence from before. This one is different. This is the kind of silence that follows clarity, when there's nothing left to debate, nothing left to explain. All day one side shouted, all day one side danced, all day one side begged, and nothing happened. The other side spoke once, and everything changed. The contrast is impossible to miss. One side relied on noise, the other relied on response. One side worked harder and harder, the other side didn't need to. This wasn't about volume, or enthusiasm, or numbers. It wasn't about who looked more confident. It was about whether anyone was actually listening on the other end. And now the answer is obvious. The fire doesn't just end the challenge, it exposes it, because the real difference wasn't effort, it was presence. And the impact of that moment is going to reach far beyond the altar, because what just happened doesn't stay on the mountain. The confrontation was never about strength, it was about response. That's what the entire day on Mount Carmel comes down to. Not effort, not passion, not numbers, just response. When everything is stripped down, the contrast is painfully clear. Two altars, two sacrifices, two approaches. One side shouted for hours. One side spoke once. One side filled the mountain with noise. One side filled it with silence. And only one side received an answer. This is the part people often miss. The prophets of Baal didn't fail because they didn't try hard enough. They failed because effort alone doesn't create reality. You can multiply volume, you can repeat words, you can increase intensity, but none of that guarantees that someone is actually listening. Noise feels powerful, especially in public. It looks convincing, it attracts attention, it creates the impression of momentum. But noise by itself doesn't prove anything. That's the uncomfortable lesson of this story. Popularity doesn't guarantee truth, and volume doesn't create power. If it did, Baal would have won easily. The modern parallel is obvious. It's like the difference between marketing and delivery. You can promote something non-stop, you can advertise it everywhere, you can talk about it louder than anyone else, but at some point, the product either works or it doesn't. No amount of hype replaces results. Elijah didn't win because he was more confident. He wasn't louder. He wasn't more persuasive. He didn't dominate the crowd emotionally. He won because he depended on something real. He didn't try to manufacture an outcome. He didn't force a reaction. He didn't compensate with performance. He simply acted as if the response would come, or it wouldn't. And that made all the difference. One side spent the entire day trying to convince everyone. The other side didn't need to convince anyone, because the response spoke for itself. That's why the fire mattered less than what it represented. It showed that reality doesn't respond to noise. It responds to presence. And once that becomes visible, everything else falls apart. The silence of Baal wasn't neutral. It was the answer, and the fire wasn't just a miracle. It was clarity. One side tried to convince, the other simply responded. And that difference still matters. So, which story should be simplified next? Samson, Elisha, or Gideon?